right, welcome back to the Sean Trey Show. I have a really interesting guest today, Alexander Lee-Rekers. And now, who are you, and what do you do?
Oh, that's a good question.
Right?
I am I'm a writer primarily. I'm a writer, theatre maker. I do some producing, and I'm also an educator, a teacher. And I'm based in Sydney, Australia. And I spend most of my time working in theatre, although I have done some work in television. But I'm, as most writers, keen to work across all industries, wherever the work takes us.
Nice. Now, what type of writing do you do? I mean, are we talking novels? Are we talking screenplays? What type of writing are you working on?
Predominantly theatre. I've had a strange pathway through the arts in my lifetime. I started out as a classical musician, trained for 20 years as a violinist and a pianist, decided that wasn't for me, and then I moved to the film and trained there, and then eventually found my way to theatre, where I just fell in love. So most of the work I do is writing around live performance, that sort of area.
You're a classically trained musician. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Started at a very young age, as many musicians do. I come from an artistic family, a lot of actors, a lot of musicians in my family, so it was always there, always highly prized, and it was something that carried me through, my youth until, well, I still play now. I still work as a sound designer and composer on certain shows. That's something I don't do as much these days, but the love is there. I'll still perform, and violin, fiddle as I call it, is great because it goes with just about every style. So I'll sit at the back of any band that'll have me on stage and play along.
That's awesome. Now, fiddle, as you call it, there's a slightly different connotation there because I grew up in the southeastern part of the USA for part of my life, and fiddle means something that you play with bluegrass, and there's that folk vibe to the fiddle versus violin is a little different. Now, tell me about that.
Absolutely. Look, I think it comes down to my teenage rebellion of classical European violin. My love was folk music, particularly bluegrass to start with. Then I branched out into different styles, so a lot of Celtic, some Cajun fiddle, which is something I've always adored, and then moving into different areas as well. So for a while I was part of a tango band and played tango violin. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, I was really interested in those kind of different folk styles because to me they felt more real, is a funny way of putting it. But it was, I had this lovely connection to culture and to history in those.
I have I think the best cinematic reference to that difference between violin and fiddle has to be the movie Titanic.
Oh yeah, and that was when I was growing up. That was the understanding. They go, oh, he plays the fiddle like in Titanic, and
and for people who don't remember that scene, upstairs they have the the traditional music, the European violin, standard small quartet type thing going on, and then you go down below the deck to where the working class people were, and this guy was just jamming on the fiddle.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's that kind of community feeling that I love so much from that, is that, look, classical music's beautiful. It's got a very, very strong place in my heart, but the kind of connection you have playing in a pub at 2 a.m. with complete strangers is just unparalleled. There's something so wonderful and magical about it. So it's something I gravitated towards and still have a great fondness for today.
And I remember I think one of the things that I loved about the fiddle was the intensity, because I remember watching some bluegrass when I was a kid, and or you can just go on and watch a video of Dave Matthews Band, or now modern time, like the cello guys. I mean, they are not playing fiddle, but by the end of the video, and I remember the end of a bluegrass show, and the guy's bow was essentially almost destroyed.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was just like he was attacking the fiddle, and it was amazingly done.
And I think it's when you come from a culture that is so refined and is so much about it's conservatory learning. It's that idea of this is the way we've done it for hundreds of years, and people do this. To break free of that is so exciting, so enticing to be able to go on stage and just not have to stand a certain way and not have to be a certain way. And also, the learning style is different. It's coming through, you're learning by ear and learning through the connection with somebody else, as opposed to walking into a room and I remember seeing that wonderful film Whiplash years ago and sitting there going, I've been through that. I know that kind of teacher. And I have an odd sort of respect for that kind of draconian learning. Maybe not so much in the film, but I've been there, and I know those teachers get results. But, going and sitting with somebody and having them teach you something that has been passed down to them is a really quite beautiful experience. It's a really wonderful thing to behold. And, you see some of these old folk guys and they will sit there and they'll hear a piece twice and they'll pick up their instrument and they can just play along. And it's amazing.
Well, you just touched on something that I would love to dive into, because that essence of draconian learning, and we're going to get back to your history and your story and stuff, but I really love to touch on that because you and I have trained and worked in the field of acting and theater. And for a long time, a lot of, I remember reading these famous, it seems to be something in the arts that there is this school of draconian learning, because I've heard about theater teachers, I've seen acting teachers just take apart a student. And I had it growing up, not in the arts, but when I played sports, I had, one or two coaches that just would take apart a player. And for me, and whether it was an acting, class or whether it was sports, I didn't respond to that. I needed someone who nurtured.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's what's required. Talking as an educator, and I am one of those people in the industry who prides myself on teaching as something that I do and is part of my regular practice. In fact, it's part of my practice. It's not just something it's not a day job I fall back on. It's part of the kind of creative I am, because I think that all storytelling in some ways is teaching. We tell stories, we impart knowledge, we provoke ideas. But to return to your initial point, I think that kind of draconian teaching is something we need to phase out and quickly, because I think so much of it's based around control and it's based around, sadly, I think, an inarticulation of acting teachers and teachers in general who understand very little about actually communicating. I think there are brilliant practitioners, brilliant people out there who are not good teachers.
I agree.
And it's a tough thing to see because they've got so much knowledge, and I think so much of it comes from a good place. But when you're teaching and working and going through, I think also very old institutions, they are so set in their ways that this is what works. It's at times, I think it completely clouds what the message is there, which is to nurture a passion, nurture a talent. I remember being at the Conservatorium of Music in Sydney, Australia, has a high school, and I went to the high school, which was a strange place because it was in some ways quite a ramshackle school. The classes weren't amazing. It was in this beautiful old government house building, the old government house stables here in Australia. So it looks like a castle. It looked like Hogwarts.
That's pretty awesome.
Which was it was great. A fascinating place to go. Classes thrown together, but the music program, of course, was unparalleled. Yeah. I remember being told on several occasions, because it stuck with me, if you do not wish to pursue music as a career, you do not belong here, and you should leave, because there is a child waiting for your place that will do something with it. And I remember even at the time, as the kind of child who never broke a rule, what utter crap I thought that was. I thought, we're not here to learn a trade. This is not a trade school. This is a place where you nurture a passion. And that's something I've taken on board a lot, especially with teaching in the arts and working as an educator and acting coach, something like that. I think it's so important to find the passion and to nurture that rather than preparing somebody, as a means to an end of fulfilling their place in the industry.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's interesting because, so many of the people that I've interviewed, they one of the common themes is you have to love what you're doing. You have to love it. Because if you don't, you're not going to have the fire, the passion to chase it down, because let's be real. The industries, whether it be music or art, are based success in those industries, albeit there are the people who, hit their home run and get lucky. For most people, it's not, I would say, a war of attrition, but you have to almost, be willing to keep going up every time you get knocked down, because, the industry is based off of the idea of repetitious trying per se.
Absolutely.
And go ahead.
Oh no, I was agreeing with you. I think it's so tough to weather this industry if you're not resilient. And I think that's one of the best skills you can learn is to find that push and pull, and to be able to kind of bend to the wind at times and not just break and snap.
And that one of the things that I've been looking to do, and that part of this podcast is something like that, is something along those lines, is I think one of the most important things too is the concept of building your tribe. That you have to have not just a team of people around you, but a tribe, a group of people that have similar goals and that you can bounce ideas off of, that you can grow with, because I feel like it is tough to do so much of this alone.
Absolutely, yeah.
What do you think on that?
Look, total agreement. I think it's actually one of the great unspoken virtues of formal training, especially at an institution that can occasionally step on your neck. I think you go through that experience with people, and you learn to find those people that are going to support you. And I think, I went through the master's program at NIDA, the National Institute of Dramatic Arts, here in Australia. And I found that to be, it's a challenging course, obviously, but there I found I call them my creative community, my tribe. And what I loved about that so much was every day I went to a place where no matter how much it asked of me, I was regarded as the artist that not even I believed I was. It was just that case of having people identify you as that and recognize you as that. And I think that's one of the most wonderful, resilient things you can do in this industry, is just have people calling upon you to be that, even when you don't feel it yourself. Because obviously, so often we find ourselves victim to imposter syndrome, and we think we're the least qualified person in the room, and sometimes we are. That's fine. Yeah. But when people have that belief in us, it's a secret weapon.
There was something in the news yesterday. It was kind of a terrifying story, but actually really interesting at the same time. And the comments were just really interesting. There was a pilot somewhere, I can't remember where it was at. It might have been South Africa. But this pilot lost his license for having, not lost his license, but he was grounded for having kind of a fake license. And people were like, wow, and generally people would be like, this is horrible. But the thing that was interesting was he had been flying for 20 years. And at that point in time, all the comments on social media were like, just give the guy a damn license at this point in time. Because, if he hasn't been doing it right for 20 years, then, it's like they would have caught it. The idea of the imposter syndrome pops up there. If someone's doing it for 20 years, they might not be an imposter. You know what I mean? Albeit, I want all of my pilots to be officially trained.
Look, airline health and safety aside, absolutely, I think, imposter syndrome is something it also works in tiers, I think. You would go back to something you've maybe done 5 years ago and go, oh, I was fine there. But I think we always find a new level with which to judge ourselves, perhaps less favorably than we should. But I think imposter syndrome is one of those things that can keep us honest as well. I think it's always good to re-examine what your place is in that room full of people, and to know what you can contribute and what you can get from that.
I was noticing that too. Like, one of the things that I've been rethinking a lot of things after starting this podcast. And one of the reasons is that I trying to figure out how to phrase this. I think on levels I was underestimating and overestimating myself. All right, well, what does that mean? Overestimating, I think that there was this degree of entitlement that me as an actor I carried with me. Well, I should be getting better stuff. I should be further along than I am. I should be having this or that. I should have my Oscar on the shelf already, But I underestimated myself because all of these people that I've spoken with were doing really interesting stuff that they necessarily weren't qualified to be doing, but they'd pulled it off. This guy directs a feature film with, $5,000. This guy, pulls off this project that everyone said he couldn't pull off. And it was like, but they just put their hearts into it and they pulled it off and they aimed big.
And who doesn't want to be that guy?
Right?
This is probably, feeling like, look, I didn't make the $10,000 project, but if I had the opportunity to make a $5,000 feature film, I would jump at it. And I have such respect for people who do. Absolutely, yeah. I remember there's a wonderful Australian playwright named Lachlan Philpott who took over a senior position at a venture here called Playwriting Australia, which is a sort of a network for playwrights here. And he, in his opening address, his open letter when he took over this position, made this lovely point about, well, particularly for writers, but for artists in general, we have to redefine the term of writer to ourselves and redefine the term of artist to ourselves. And the idea that maybe we've grown up with or that we were taught in school or in drama school is wildly different from what the lifestyle is. Yeah. But once you let go of that, of course, whatever your path is the artist that you are. So he talked in particular about teaching, educating, writing commission for young people. That's just a field that I'm very much involved in, which is lovely. Don't think of yourself as, well, how do you define yourself as a writer if you're only looking at main stage theatre commissions, of which you will perhaps receive 1 in 10 years because there are so many of you. And I think about this a lot of the time with actors. Actors who think less of themselves for doing a commercial as opposed to a stage role, or a stage role as opposed to a feature film. And I think there's a constant reinvention of ourselves, which is so important to think about what our path is and what our art-making process is in our lives. And I think once we can do that, it's actually quite a freeing, beautiful thing because we're able to forge our own destiny.
You bring up a point that I absolutely love. And this is something that I've been looking at more and more about success and the idea of success as an artist, because one of the things that my wife, I don't know if I've talked to you. My wife is a famous singer here in Vietnam. She was the first winner of Vietnam Idol.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, and so I do a lot of our media. But my wife is always telling me, what advice do you have? And she's like, don't play fair. And I was like, what do you mean? And she's like, and she uses it, it's kind of tongue in cheek, but her point is that the system is not rigged for success. The system is not built to validate people, to nurture artistic talent, to build creativity. The system is, and I'm saying this, there is a degree of like, and I don't want to say the word exploitation, but I've seen a lot of artists that they are like, a can of Coca-Cola. And then let's get the next one. And the best example of late, I think, would be Brendan Fraser, from The Mummy and such, who's having this career renaissance and doing a lot of great stuff right now as he's coming back. Why did he leave? You know what I mean? So
absolutely, yeah. And I'm going to be honest. To extend on that, I look at someone like Brendan Fraser, and I'm I'm sure he is loving the success that he has, and power to him. And it's one of the most likable, wonderful stars that I mean, certainly I grew up with. And rewatched the Mummy recently with my partner and loved it. Such a romp. Yeah. It was great.
Yeah.
But then I look at what's being asked of him again, and I think I really hope he's treated better this time, and he's not cast aside. I mean, I love the renaissance that actors are having at the moment. I think it's great to see these performers that, and sometimes doing a total, like Matthew McConaughey, who 10, 20 years ago was the guy that took his shirt off, and now is this wonderful performer. And of course, what am I saying? He was probably always a wonderful performer. You think about how people get typecast, straight out of drama school. And
let's be real, True Detective. Oh my gosh!
Again, something else I rewatched recently, and I look at these actors and I think this is wonderful for them. But I do hope that in some ways, that the industry is, if not better, is certainly more transparent. So I know that Brendan Fraser talked about a lot of exploitation and terrible things that happened to him on his path up. And I hope that these things aren't going to be as prevalent now. I feel a little foolish even saying that, but
we'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. But I think that idea of draining actors and casting them aside, I mean, it's something I have a very strong opinion and feeling about, because I was raised by actors. My mother and my stepfather are both performers, and I lived with them and watched them go through, getting roles, doing this, doing that, struggling with that life, and watching them, get to a certain age and be told, you're not this anymore, now you're this character, or, come back when you look like a dad, come back when you look like a granddad, that sort of thing. And watching them struggle with the identity being slapped on them by a casting director, and thinking, how awful, I mean, that's something that scared me off acting myself, and thinking.
I still, and I know maybe I can get myself in trouble for this a little bit. No, it's not trouble, but I still question, I'm figuring out how to word this, the disproportionate power of casting directors. And one of the things, and so I'm gonna expound upon this, and we are gonna come back to your stories. Forgive me for taking these tangents today. One of the things that I really enjoy in the modern climate is the empowerment of social media, the ability for creators, because I believe that most actors, most filmmakers, most writers are at their essence creators, and I'm not talking just, a video blog or something like that. I there's a renaissance that's happening with people being able to produce their own content and people being able to produce their own shorts and things like, and this is kind of the essence of what, like Stage Milk is doing, creating a climate where people can create so that they are not beholden as much to what other people see of them. I remember one casting session I went into, and I had gotten some sides, and the guy walked in, and the casting director was like, You're auditioning for a rapist today. I was like, no one told me that. And he's like, but you look like a great rapist. And I was like, I look like a great rapist.
Yeah.
I just don't even know how to approach that. I mean, sure, maybe it's a great role. Maybe it's, but like to suddenly have someone to just throw me into this box. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, that's not what I'm looking for right now. That's not the brand I'm looking to create. That's not what I'm looking to create. And that kind of stuck with me as well. The disproportionate power that casting directors have. And the challenge I have with that is that it is based on people's perceptions versus, you look at, Hollywood, like, what was it? That every single last character was, and I mean, white male. and that
Absolutely.
Was, who was doing that? That's the producers, the casting directors who had these preconceived ideas, white cis male, and it's like, well, And I love there's this renaissance happening, but is it a renaissance, or is it just that they're reacting instead of actually being proactive?
Absolutely. I think that's the issue that we're going to struggle with. We're going to look at. I mean, I think a great example is someone like Louis C.K., whose entire brand was honesty and wokeness, in that kind of begrudging, self-hating white male, and hid his crimes and hid his awful personality in plain sight. And it becomes very hard to separate that when the person is so obvious. I mean, it's what Jimmy Savile did for years as well. Although not that I, put them perhaps in the same boat, but when people sell the persona as honesty, it can be very hard to separate what's actually going on with them. And I think Hollywood's going through that at the moment, where they're selling the brand of honesty and contrition. I don't know if we're actually seeing that, because I think at some point somebody had to crunch a number and go, we can still make bank by doing this kind of shift. I mean, that said, I think there are still great movements happening, and I think that's why in my recent career I've been so drawn to theatre, because
And I
can see changes taking place there. I can see shifts happening. I can see, Australia, especially Sydney, has a really interesting theatrical climate here, because we don't have mid-tier theatres.
Oh, interesting.
We've got sort of smaller, like independents, theatres. We've got the big main stage, like National Theatre style things. Nothing in the middle, in the vein of a place like London. You've got mid-tier theatres in the West End where people can have that step up in the career. So what we find is that people either do a quick jump, and they either find themselves on stage very quickly, they're elevated quickly, and there's of course the politics of that. But it also means those small independent theatres really step up what that content is. They are the tastemakers. They're the people who have to step up and start elevating and giving people more time and resources. So here it's tough in some ways to advance, but I think there are a lot of people, and at the moment in my career, I'm quite happy being on the smaller scale, because that's where the exciting stories are happening. And it's fun to be a part of that, even if my part of that at times is to sit down and shut up. As a cis white male, I'm doing fine. I can sit out a season if somebody's got something truly amazing to say. I'd rather hear that than whatever I have to say.
That's the thing that I am. I see something like, what do you call it? Hamilton. What an amazing musical, and it's representing voices that need to be represented. Like, that's what my daughter is half American, half Vietnamese. And when she saw Raya, the new Disney movie that's based around Southeast Asian characters, she looked up at me and she's like, "Daddy, they look like me." And she was so excited about that. And I think that the idea of representation is so important. And I think that was why, Chadwick Boseman was such an important character to the African American community. And like, when he passed, the photos, tributes that I saw going up online were devastating, because you had these little kids that were like, truly a hero died, and I think it's just, but yet the power in that is that there was this hero, you know what I mean? And this character that was a beautiful representation. Because if film and theater are not a representation of what we are collectively dealing with in real life, what are they?
Absolutely. And I think, something that Marvel can do very well. I don't think, I haven't seen every film, and I don't particularly have the desire to, if I'm honest, but I think they have this tremendous platform with which to speak. And I think every now and then they say wonderful things. And also, this kind of, mass-produced, mass appeal art is often how we can make the biggest changes. And it's fascinating to watch, a wonderful director like Taika Waititi, who I remember. I remember watching his stuff in the mid to late 2000s. Back when I was in high school, and going, "This guy's really interesting. I wonder what he'll do," and just see him take on a system and within
Yeah.
that forge his own path and have this representation and be able to tell these stories. And
I mean,
he will be one of
him
those
playing Hitler in Jojo Rabbit was brilliant.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think this is at times you do have to step into the lion's den in order to make change. And I think Wettidia is a great example of a director who is doing that so well.
Yeah.
And again, I think if Marvel's backing it, if Disney's backing it, they know that's the path forward. And I think that's something we can all look to. I mean, it's an outdated mode to think that this is not what people want, because
exactly. And this is what, again, I love about new media, because what people are doing, what he's doing is he's out making his own content. And his point was, if I go out and make my own stuff, I don't have to wait for other people to write something that they think I'm a good fit for. You know what I mean? Like, for me, I'm a rapist,
Yeah.
And it's like, oh God, And that movie was interesting. It actually was a movie that did quite well here, but I was like, not for me.
Yeah, and I think that's something I struggle with at times. It's something my partner reminds me of. If I see something I don't like, they'll say, "This wasn't necessarily made for you to not everything's made for you."
Exactly.
I think it's actually, when I think about that, I actually find that quite a freeing concept, because I'll go along to anything and I'll want to find the good in it. I mean, I think there's a difference between something that's perhaps exclusionary. I think I want something that's going to be put there and say, like, if I'm not the audience, I still want to be able to appreciate it as a work of art, or what it's trying to do at the very least. But I think we have this great opportunity now to create work as ourselves, using social media, as you say, which is this wonderful canvas to put across new ideas. And I think what we're seeing is really exciting. Of course, yeah, and it is. I mean, I think it's like any other art form. It does require discipline, and I think. I myself am very much of a generation of people who have grown up learning the rules very publicly of what the internet is for an artist, let alone a person. The kind of edgy humor that is tripping up careers for people like James Gunn is rote on the internet. It's everyone. It was the way that when you were a young person and you had a phone, you could tweet something. That's how you felt heard. That was your graffiti. That was your screaming into the heavens. But yeah, I think, as you say, it's finding its place. I mean, funny enough, you mentioned Stage Milk. I've been working on an article for them about TikTok and how actors are using TikTok to promote themselves and to give that accessibility, which 10 years ago we probably would have found terrifying, like a Black Mirror episode, the fact that everyone knows who you are and knows what you're eating. And of course, we moderate this. We moderate and limit our access that people have to us. But the amount of love that people feel for just feeling connected to, and I say a celebrity, but that sounds glib. But I think what I'm talking about is a person whose life and whose work means a lot to us.
I like that.
I remember watching the great Steve Earle doing a series on YouTube of him sitting in his house, just playing different instruments and talking through his collection of guitars and mandolins. Awesome. And absolutely beautiful. And last year, sadly, we lost his son. His son passed, the great Justin Townes Earle, and how he dealt with that on camera to some degree. And it was perhaps 30 seconds of a 7-minute clip where he talked about a mandolin and played a terrific song. But to see that openness, and I thought, at first when I saw it, I felt strange watching it. It felt voyeuristic. But then I thought, no, this is perhaps a way to connect and to help a community heal that is mourning. Maybe not as much as the father of the person themselves, but certainly in the same way, mourning a loss.
It creates that level of empathy, and I think, for the experience, and it creates a connection. And I think the best theater, the best film is something that creates this feeling of connectedness, whether it be a horror or a comedy. There's like this shared experience, and I think that's one of the magics of film.
Empathy, I think, is is the thing that we should hold above all else. It's the thing that we should experience. It's the thing that we should teach. When I'm teaching, especially young people, empathy is the thing that I go into a room with wanting to impart, because that to me is what strengthens societies. It's what makes us better people, and of course better artists, because we are better at making that communication, making that connection. So I think any time we can do that, and social media, of course, is a great tool for that. It's something that can give you that sense of being heard and being seen, and reaching out to that person who has changed your life so profoundly.
Agreed. Now, what are some of your goals? I want to get back to you. We've been talking about these wide-ranging topics. What is your vision for yourself as a screenwriter, as an artist, as an actor?
I'm looking for balance in my life more than anything. I'm a workaholic. I will work all the time. Which is it's great. Yeah. Look, it gives and it takes. And it's something that in the last few years of my life I've had to sort of unlearn in a way, or just become aware of. So I think the first thing I'm looking for in my life as an artist is balance between my life as an artist, as a worker, and my life as the human being around that, because I know which one I choose by rote, and it doesn't lead anywhere good. In fact, it just leads to bad work eventually. So
it does.
Yeah, balance is the big thing for me, and finding that time to, one of the hardest things an artist can do, I think, is learn to say no to projects, learn to say no to opportunities, because we're so ingrained to taking every opportunity given to us. At times, you've got to step back, and I'm very much of the opinion that the people that are worth a damn in your career and your life will respect that and come back later. I think anyone who puts you on the trash heap because you couldn't say yes to that thing that one time, you've dodged a bullet there. I think that's the kind of thing you should look out for. So overall balance is what I want to do, and I just want to keep beyond that creating interesting work. I want to explore new fields.
Nice. What type of fields would you like to be jumping into?
These days, the thing I'm very interested in finding myself a part of is interactive media. So writing for video games and writing for virtual, because I think that's where our next great generation of stories is going to be told.
I talked to someone about this recently, that this next generation of screenwriters, of the young people now are growing up with a narrative structure. And it's like, think about it. When I was a child, there were kids' books that were good, and my mom pushed me to read a lot, which was great. But there wasn't this overarching, plot line in a lot of those books, and the kids movies, and I'm actually gonna say, some of the early kids movies that I watched, some of the early Disney stuff I watched was actually pretty dark.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And go ahead.
No, I just my mind just jumped to what was the Something Wicked This Way Comes, the Ray Bradbury novel, which I've been reading in lockdown, and I remember the Disney film of that, watching it when I was young, going, good God, this is dark.
Right.
Sorry, I cut you off.
Totally.
I had a strange Proust Madeline moment there. Please continue.
Yeah, that's fine. I totally am down for that. But the thing is it's interesting that games have created a bit of a revolution in the development. I've just been saying that a lot today, the revolution, but have created this development of storytelling, and young people are really raised in it now. I mean, I didn't have that as much, because rescue the princess, and you go through a bunch of levels jumping on people's heads. But video games now have these intricate storylines, and
absolutely.
And that's interesting.
And I think to bring back to what you were talking about earlier, incredible means of conveying concepts such as empathy, because we have to work through, as opposed to I'm fascinated by audience interactivity. It's something I'm keen to explore more and more in my work, in terms of having an audience by what means do you interact when you sit down in a theatre, for instance? At what point are you complicit with the ideas on stage by simply attending? And what does that do? For instance, in a play I had on earlier this year, it was a play about fascism. I'm sure we'll chat about it in greater detail at some point. A play about fascism, and there was a folk song that was written that I'd written for the show, and the show opens with this song, and the audience hears it for the first time. Later on, it plays at a town bonfire, and this town slowly descending into kind of fascist, totalitarian ideologies, and the audience sang along completely unprompted. They just learnt the song through the show and sang that and enjoyed that. And the song comes in one more time at the end of the show during a racist rally. And suddenly the themes of the song about, it's about our land, it's about our home, suddenly take on this awful new relevance. And it was a fascinating thing to sit in an audience and hear them totally unprompted. Of course, we're in the age of COVID as well, so you can't tell an audience to sing even if you wanted to.
Yeah.
But this chorus kind of gurgled forth in the dark. And it's one of those things I think about interactivity and how when you're an audience, especially when you're consuming a video game or interactive media, you make a choice. You make a choice to participate. You make a choice to press the button that moves the thing forward.
And it makes it more memorable in ways. There was a theater company in Los Angeles, and I've talked about this before, and they did Point Break live. And have you heard about Point Break live?
No, it's wonderful.
What it was that they had all of the characters were cast except for the character of Keanu's character, and it was that person was picked from the audience that day, given a wig, and then they read from cue cards the whole day. And so every week you'd have a different Keanu, and it would be someone in the audience, and it would be phenomenally interesting because people were rooting for that person, and everyone in the audience is like, that could have been me. And it's just very interesting at that because, and they were tongue-in-cheek saying Keanu couldn't act, you know what I mean? But,
yeah.
But the idea was brilliant because it brought people, the entire audience was rooting for that person. They were rallying for them. They believed in them, and it created a more memorable experience.
And I think it also breaks down the barriers between artist and audience, which in a medium like theatre is one of the death throes of what can kill off that type of art, because it can feel exclusive. It can feel like a club you're not a part of. And to break down that feeling, to cast you as the hero, which many games do, I think, is really exciting because somebody gets to experience that and feel that they're a part of the action and they're part of the art. They're part of that storytelling experience. And I hope, in a larger, more philosophical sense, that means more people start telling stories and start realizing that art is something that they can attain in their lives and they can enjoy. And they may not get to Hollywood with it, but I think everyone could stand to jot down a short story or have a go at performing. Just getting up and being someone else.
And I like the idea of, I never thought of that. You're so right. You are the hero. You're the hero, and we drift through life. And albeit I've had some good moments, I don't always necessarily think that I'm the hero of the narrative. You know what I mean? And so, but yet, these video games and these plays allow you to be that, and that is so important. And maybe you don't go back to your daily life as the hero, but you sure as hell can learn some lessons from it. And
I think just to enjoy the experience of feeling what that's like. Because, there are days when, I agree, I'm not the hero either. And I love that. I like being in that support role. I like, one of the things I love about being a writer is you are so central to the process, and yet you can't do anything on your own. You are in some ways so helpless, and within that you get to see the very best of what the creative industry has to offer, because people take your work and nurture it and give it that time and ask you questions you'd never thought of, and that's a really, really beautiful thing to me.
Right.
But I think it's important for people to feel that, and for anyone to feel that, because I think with great power comes great responsibility. It's that very
Right.
idea. I think when we're made to be the hero and make those choices, suddenly we can look upon some really tough concepts. We can look upon some really difficult things and start to gain empathy for the people who make those decisions or the situations that are bring those
really
decisions out.
There was a sure. I'm going to pop into something and not getting into politics here, but there was a really interesting study that recently was put out where they were able to change people's perspectives by making them imagine something. And they what they found was that really traditionally conservative people were able to were changed immediately into extremely liberal people by giving them one mind experiment. If you make them Superman.
Yes, I remember reading about this. This is fascinating. Yeah.
If you make them Superman, they suddenly change up. I want to help everyone. These people they need to take care of themselves. They've got to pick themselves up by the bootstraps, but you give that person the power of Superman. And suddenly they turn into extremely altruistic and they start focusing on helping people. And it's interesting that how when you put someone into that role of hero, there is a degree of selflessness, not selflessness, but of people begin to think about what they would do if they had that power. And with great power comes great responsibility.
Absolutely, and really, all we're talking about there is empathy. It's about going, and this is where something like the concept of checking one's privilege is so helpful, because we say, well, yes, you're not Superman, but you can maybe do more than this other person. Wouldn't it be great to acknowledge that and maybe use that to help?
Yes.
Read into this what you will, but it's always why I've been terrified of Superman as a concept, as a superhero, because I thought, why is he being so nice? What happens when we piss him off?
There's something
so
terrifying. They looked
terrifying.
at with what was that movie that was like the Dark Superman concept?
There you go. Yeah, it's
It was by I'll have to look that up. But it was the idea of a completely alternate Superman character where he's the villain. Go ahead.
No, it's such a fascinating idea, because he is this sort of
all-powerful character.
This all-powerful character who, by his own whims, wishes to help us. And I wonder, why. And also, I start to get the things about, well, if Superman can go back and save Lois Lane, should he? Superman's not letting us die. He's not letting us live, therefore. But maybe that's getting too I'm thinking too much into it.
No, but I think that's the beauty, and I think that's what you have to do. You have to think too much into it. You have to question these maxims that we've been shown and these concepts that are kind of pitched.
And also why being cast as the hero and realizing that kind of fallibility is so important. And I read a wonderful article, I think it was on Gamer Sutra, which talks about it's a kind of a more scholarly take on video game journalism, and it was written by an economist talking to his daughter, and she was playing a game called Animal Crossing, which apparently is you do chores for people and you make money and you can buy decorations for your house. And he said, I sat down with my daughter one morning and she seemed very upset. She was about 6 years old, and she outlined her displeasure playing this game because she was doing chores all day to fill her house with stuff. And then eventually her stuff wouldn't fit in her house. So she had to buy a bigger house. And that just made her want to get more stuff. So she did more chores. And then eventually got a bigger house and a bigger house. She said, the only person who's really happy in this game, it seems, is the person selling me these houses. And he went, wow, that's a degree's worth of information about capitalism and economy imparted to this 6-year-old girl on a Nintendo. And I just think, that's where stories are very interesting. That's where things are getting quite fascinating to me. These learning tools that get people into the mindset. And as you say, imagine you're Superman. What do you do? If you can do anything in a scenario, then really that determines a lot about who you are, how you go through that.
You bring up the point of having the daughter, and and I've been throughout all of this. I think I've been looking at myself, and my did I do enough to this point to help other people to bring more, to be an honorable person, and I wish I could have done more. But the thing is once I had my daughter, I told myself I have to be better. I have to try harder. And so I think that there's this idea of, we can, as writers, we have power. You know what I mean? And like the writers have power to be writing things. And I think there is a great responsibility as a writer to write things that
Certainly
are powerful, that can change things. Now let's imagine I give you Aladdin's lamp, and you have one wish. You get to use it in regards to your creative abilities. It has to be something regarding your career or creative nature. What would you do with that?
Oh, that's the power. No, see, I find myself thinking in two different camps. I mean, one I would ask for, perhaps an increase of my own personal skills as a writer. But then the other half of me thinks, let's say, a terrific theatre. I could have a terrific theatre company that allows me to, without thought of budget or scale, elevate 10 great works a year of other people I've seen. I think I don't know what I'd choose. So maybe I'd choose differently if I was on my own. Who knows? But then that's part of my journey as an artist is getting to the point now where I can start to find work of other people and hopefully put that forward. For instance, I've got a company here in Australia called Ratcatch Theatre, and that's primarily been a producing vehicle for my original work. We are, at the moment, working on bringing an Australian premiere of a show, which I can't confirm yet, sadly.
No
not being of my writing. It's just something I'm producing. My co-director is going to be directing the work. I'll be producing it. And it's a very exciting prospect to be able to bring a good story that I don't necessarily have to own the story, own the writing of.
That's awesome.
So that's, I guess, it'd be something in terms of that, furthering that journey where I'm not the artist because I have the control over necessarily every part of it. And I think that's a really important thing for writers to learn as well, to go, it's not just you.
If you see something good, if you see people who are talented, help them,
Yeah, and if it's, sometimes that's just, going to see their show, like paying for a ticket.
Yes.
And I am, I'm one of those people that at the level I'm at, I get a lot of free tickets to show. Not at the moment. I get a lot of free tickets to shows. I'm happy to buy a ticket to your show. Don't invite me on opening night. I will come along in the season when I can and pay full price ticket, because that's the least. It's the literal least I can do. Yeah. But I would love to be in a position where I'm able to see great work, especially when I go back and teach at my old stomping ground, and I'm working with the next generation of writers that are going to be jumping into the industry. I'm seeing some amazing work from them. I'd love to be able to produce some of that and work with them on that further. There's so much good stuff out there. But yeah, just a matter of having that freedom, which is, it's a money thing as much as it is anything else. But having the freedom to work with people and see their stories told.
That's awesome. Now, do you have any last thoughts or last bits of advice for anyone watching today? That might be.
Certainly, yeah. I think. I mean, I'm gonna say this to writers particularly, but I think to any artist, it's not a solo operation.
Yes.
One of the things that I have had to learn, or unlearn, I should say, I do a lot of unlearning these days, is don't think of your art as a solitary thing. Especially for writers, because we have this image of us sitting with tuberculosis in a garret, writing on a typewriter. And I've a real experience of taking my writing to actors, to other writers, to people I know, and showing them drafts and getting their opinion. I mean, before last year, I hated the idea of workshopping my work. Going in for a 3-day session with actors and having them do improv and answer questions and character study, because to me that was a sign that I'd failed. That I had failed as a writer, because the world to create was my own, and they shouldn't have to do that, nor should they, because it's my ideas and they've got no right to it. And letting go of that, which is as much as it was, I think, pretension and self-importance as it was insecurity, letting go of that means that you've got these beautiful involved pieces that are informed by the artists you're working with. So my last show, The Linden Solution, was workshopped with the cast once before COVID and once during COVID, because our season was postponed. We were lucky enough to perform this year, which was wonderful. So to have their opinion and to have them talk about the characters and the work, and just by that process also getting to know them as people and having them open up and being able to ask them more involved questions about some of the more controversial aspects of the play. So it really strengthens your work. So I think that's my parting advice, is that invite people into your art, into your life, and get them working with you, because the more that we can demystify the process of creating, the more people will be able to kind of come and help and enjoy that.
Well, and that goes back to the idea of building your team, building your tribe. You have to have a group of people around you that can support what you're doing.
Absolutely. And that's not to say that you can't, explore things on your own and have that time, because sometimes that's really important as well. But in my understanding, it's always been better to have those people there, and your work is better for it. And the sooner you understand that it's time to let go or embrace, I think your life as an artist is so much more fulfilling.
Well, if you look at it as well, like many, if not all of the great screenplays that have won Oscars or things in recent years have been co-written. It's been multiple writers on board. It's not just one person. And
if they haven't been co-written, there've been people looking at it, developed rewrites that we never hear about as well. A script is a living thing. A script is a weird thing, especially a film script, because
it's constantly evolving. And
in its best form, it's meant to be discarded. It's meant to be made redundant by the film that it creates.
Totally.
Which to me is a wild, wonderful thing. To think that if I do my job, no one will ever read this. God, actually, out loud, that sounds awful. But, this idea of, we create and we put everything into what we can. And it's so exciting working with, I'm a director as well. I've directed plays in the past. I do some film directing and things. But I hate directing my own work because it feels such a closed loop. I love somebody coming in and having that experience of being able to take my work and pull it apart and really challenge you as well to say, this doesn't make sense, or what do you mean by this? And you learn to fight those battles when you need to. But most of the time, this stuff is coming from a place of love and respect of somebody who wants to make this the best thing it can possibly be. And those moments when somebody challenges you and everything changes in the script are just delightful. They're fantastic.
That's awesome. Well, on that note, I want to say thank you for coming on the show today, man. I really appreciate that.
Sean, it's been so much fun. Thank you so much.
Really if you'd like to come back, because we didn't dive into everything. If you'd like to come back on sometime and talk about, a topic or something that you really enjoy, just let me know.
Anytime. I'd love that. Thank you so much.
Awesome.